our wonderful friend Jeff Logie, who has been with us forever and ever, major member of the Moria Federation,
Bây giờ thì tôi
devoted
muốn giới
student
thiệu
and
các bạn một
teacher,
người tên
coming
là
from
Joseph
New Zealand, right? You're in New Zealand.
Logier, người đang sống
Wonderful
ở
to
New
have you, Jeff.
Zealand
It's
và
very
là một
early.
Hi,
cái
hi.
thành viên tích cực
Fabulous to be here.
ở trong
I
trường
grow and
Moria
glow in my spiritual family, eh?
Federation của chúng ta.
Yes.
You know, when you were talking with Peter in his first lecture at the conference back in '87, I was there, and it reminded me that he gave this talk on winning lotteries. And he said, anyone that has this particular configuration should buy a ticket in multi-million dollar lotteries. You know, 20, 30, 50 million plus. Anyway,
Chú đang nói
I
về
thought
một cái rất là
I had
hay
the
là
exact
nếu mà
configuration he was talking about.
mà
Where we were in
bởi vì
Newark,
cái
there was
chú
nowhere to buy a
Peter vừa
lottery
rồi chú
ticket.
ấy
So
nói là có một
I thought
số
if
những
it's
cái
meant to
mẫu
be, it'll
hình ấy,
be.
nó liên quan đến các cái
Anyway, after
đấng
about 3 weeks, I
thiên
arrived
nhân
back in
của
New Zealand to
vũ
check my
trụ ấy.
bank account,
Nếu mà chúng ta nhận ra cái
and
mẫu hình đó ở trong
$52 million
lá số
in
của
there.
chúng ta vào một cái thời điểm nhất định thì chúng ta
Go
nên đi
figure.
mua số
Anyway,
trị
as
giá
fate would have
20
it,
hay 50
it
triệu
wasn't
đô,
mine. The
bởi
bank made
vì
a
vào
mistake,
thời điểm đó thì rất dễ là chúng ta sẽ
and
trúng xổ
had to give
số.
it all back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Và
Yeah,
tôi
I've
thì
just
nhận
got to
ra là
find
tôi
my.
có đầy đủ thì tôi cũng có cái mẫu hình của các góc chiếu đó ở trong lá số của
Okay.
tôi.
I'm going to share the screen. Let's just put this up on. Every time I touch this, for some reason, it changes its formatting. Teething problems, people. Mode. Yeah. Okay, we're all good. We'll have to run with this. Full screen. There you go. Okay. See that? Okay.
Các bạn có nhìn thấy không?
Hold on. I need to ask. Now, this is an image. I'm not sure what the source of it is, but I think that it comes from those people that do trekking up in
linh hồn là cái gì, nhưng mà
the
tôi nghĩ
Wessex
là
Valley. I find this particularly evocative. You know, it's just stunning. And I thought,
cái
given
hình này
we're still in the
là ở
Wessex
trong cái
zone,
thung lũng biển đảo, nó rất là tuyệt
I
vời.
thought, well, we may as well use this as best we can. Try and make a most effective use of what's available. Of course, in this, we're, different to what the usual kind of ones that we have of the assembled hierarchy around a five-pointed star, which personally I prefer this kind of thing, because all of that type of symbolism is left to our creative imagination. But here, it's a bit more like being Johnny on the spot and the presence of it all, Anyway, me being me, of course, and us being theosophical people, I tend to project all of my ageless wisdom doctrine onto the image and perhaps distort it. But I suppose that's what they're for. They're here for us to evoke a connection to the spiritual realities that are going on in these instances.
Tức là
So I'm
chú muốn
thinking
nói
we do
là
a quick
các
alignment
cái
and focus
biểu tượng thì luôn luôn
on this
làm cho
particular
chúng
image.
ta nâng cao cái khả năng trực giác.
And I'm just
Nhưng
going
mà
to
cái biểu
read
tượng
out
này rất là đặc biệt.
Formula One because it
Và
relates
bây giờ chúng ta có
very
thể thử
much to
tham
this
thiền về
particular
nó
festival of
với cả
Wessex
cái công thức số
and
1
the entire
là ở trong toàn
factor of
bộ
building the Antakarana and the
cái
role that
con
Mercury
đường
plays
Antakarana
in
này,
this.
cùng với cả sự liên hệ với cả
Right?
thủy tinh.
So,
Thì,
and I'm sorry I can't get the image any bigger than what it is.
và
It'll
tôi rất xin
distort.
lỗi là tôi không làm cho cái hình ảnh này nó to hơn được để cho các bạn có
It is
một
what it
cái
is.
biểu tượng rõ ràng hơn.
So just focusing on the image. Notice
Giờ hãy tập trung
this
vào
must
cái hình
be
ảnh
at
này
the sacred moment. Notice
và hãy
the heads
để
are
ý
bowed, all facing in the
đây
same
đúng là
direction.
một cái
And I
khoảnh
figure
khắc
this is at
thiêng
the
liêng.
moment of the
Tất
full
cả mọi
moon when
người
the
đều
blessing
hướng vào một
is
điểm
bestowed
về một
upon the
phía,
assembled
chắc hẳn đó
crowd.
là trăng tròn, và chúng ta thấy một đám đông đang ở
So I
đây.
feel it's particularly special. So
Nó
just
chắc
focusing on
chắn
that
là sẽ
image.
rất là đặc
I'll read
biệt.
this formula.
Và tôi đọc cái
A line
công
of
thức này
fire between two blazing points.
ở
A stream of water blue. Again a line emerging from the earth and
một cái
ending in the
dòng nước
ocean.
xanh ờ,
A tree with root
phát
above
lên
and
từ trái
flowers
đất
below.
và đi vào trong một dòng sông.
Out of the fire and always at the midway point
Ở phía xa,
appears the eye of
ở
God,
điểm rưỡi,
Shiva.
chúng ta nhìn thấy
Upon the
đôi
stream
mắt
between
của
the two
Caesar,
extremes,
rồi
there
một
floats the
vòng
eye of
dòng
vision. The
tình
thread of
thương
light unites the
với
two.
đôi mắt của tầm nhìn.
Deep in the tree between the root and the
Ở
flowers,
trên
the
cái
eye
cây
again is seen.
thì đôi
The
mắt
eye
lại
that
được nhìn
knows, the
thấy
eye that sees, the directing
và
eye.
nó
One made of
nhìn
fire,
thấy
one fluid as the sea, and
cái
two
thì ở
which look
xa,
from here
cái
to
thì đi
there.
vào trong biển
Fire,
cả.
water, and the earth
Ở
all
xa,
need the
nước
vital air.
và trái đất
The
đều
air
cần
is
thiết giống
life.
nhau, bởi vì ở
The
đây là
air is
sự
God.
sống, đây là thượng đế.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm just trying to get a new share up, but of course,
Và bây giờ thì tôi sẽ chia sẻ một cái
I'm having
mới.
difficulty. Why is that? Why is that, Michael?
You want to change to a new share screen?
Here we
Or
go. I got it. I
okay.
found it. Sorry, my friends. Okay. So, here we go, Mercury. An intriguing symbol, really, isn't it? I mean, we've got a combination number of things here. I mean, there's a lot of depth.
Jeff, it didn't
Sorry?
change. Your screen didn't change.
Oh, no, truly.
Maybe you need to stop sharing completely and then share again.
Maybe I do.
Yeah, if you're just if you're just sharing that image.
You got that?
Yes.
Yeah. You got the symbol of Mercury?
Yeah.
Okay. Intriguing. I mean, there's a lot of depth here, isn't there? You know, we got the symbol of the sign of Taurus, and we got the cross below. We've also got Venus involved in here. There's a lot in
Ở đây
this.
khi
And the
chúng ta đang
interesting thing
nhìn vào cái
about
biểu tượng của thủy tinh,
Mercury in the
ở
path,
dưới
given,
thì là biểu
a
tượng
lot of
của
what we're
một cặp
focusing
giá,
on here
ở
is the
trên thì
path of
chúng ta
discipleship.
thấy có một hình tròn, và ở
And
trên nữa thì
of course, the
nó
Tibetan
có một
gives
cái
us
vòng lên, nó giống như là
two
biểu
main
tượng của kim tinh,
features of the path,
giống như
influences
là
that is. The
biểu
first
tượng
he
của người
says
phụ
is
nữ.
Saturn, the second being Mercury. Of course, there are all of the other planets are involved, but in terms of the role that these play, they're quite pivotal. And of course, we're familiar with this caduceus type of imagery that's used to represent Mercury as well, you know, with the Kundalini fires.
Thì
And what is
nó
set
cũng có
free as
liên
a result
quan
of that,
đến
you know?
cái dòng Kundalini,
Serpent
ngọn lửa.
represents Ida and Pingala, the
Ở đây
nadis, while
chúng
the
ta
shaft
thấy
wanders the Shushama.
hai cái đường
Center of
kinh
the
tuyến
spine.
ở trong
Okay, so
đường
just a little bit here.
Antakrana.
I didn't want to pull
Chúng
out
ta
too
cũng
much
nhìn
information
thấy
of basic stuff because we can all find that on the internet, but just as a visual, you know, and a placement of where we're at with this thing, this is the orbits of the Sun Vulcan zone as we understand it currently, the
ở
orbit of
đây chúng ta
Mercury,
thấy cái
Venus,
quỹ đạo
and our
của
Earth.
mặt
And of
trời
course,
với cả
orbit
Vulcan thì rất là
of
gần
Mercury
nhau,
is quite
và
ecliptic,
sau đó là
more
đến
so
quỹ
than
đạo
any
của
other.
kim
And of
tinh.
course, in science, they're trying to
Thì ở đây có một cái hình
find the
khác,
reasoning for why that is the case, looking at the magnetic
thì chúng
stratospheres
ta
around
nhìn
these
thấy
planets
cái
and the
trường
gravitational
của
pull of
lực
the
hấp
other
dẫn.
planets. And there was thinking that they had found that by placing Vulcan in its position, and that gave
Thì
this,
người ta cảm nhận là có một cái
depending
lực
where
hấp
Vulcan
dẫn
was in
giữa
relation to
thủy
Mercury,
tinh với cả mặt
explain
trời,
some of this
cho nên người ta
elongation
mới nghi
of
ngờ
this
là có một sự hiện diện của
ellipse, sorry,
một
of
hành
the
tinh
ellipse.
khác nằm giữa mặt
But
trời và thủy
it's
tinh.
probably it is the most ellipse orbit of all of the planets, which is quite an interesting feature. But as it's moving around in its orbit, it's like the planet itself rotates as if in slow motion. So here, and this is one of those old theosophical images of the centers, which I have a little bit of a soft spot for, as opposed to some of the more modern renditions, But this was the early pioneering work of the centers we're all familiar with. But apparently Mercury doesn't rule any of them. But it does govern the transmission exchange of the energies through these centers, which is kind of like a pivotal central role.
Thì chú đang nói là chúng ta có các 7 cái trung tâm lực chính ở trong cơ thể của chúng ta, và thủy tinh thì không cai quản bất cứ cái trung tâm lực nào, nhưng mà thủy tinh lại cai quản cái con đường vận chuyển năng lượng giữa các trung tâm lực này. Cái mà chúng ta nhìn ở đây thì nó liên quan
and
ví dụ như
divided into
là
two
Asna,
hemispheres,
trung
left
tâm
and
Asna,
right. There's a relation between the left and right eye when considering this as well.
Mắt trái và mắt phải.
So it's just like in the image above, which they showed you before. This one here of the Wessex Valley. This is where the function of these centers,
là cái chức năng của sự tổng
the
hợp.
Ajna center and of the two eyes comes in.
Đây chính là cái trung tâm của Asna, ở ngay giữa cái ngọn núi này.
And the other, in terms of the creative, imaginative sense, is Mercury.
Thì những cái mà đưa đến cái sự thay đổi trong trung tâm này chính là nhờ năng lượng của thủy tinh.
So, generally we're familiar with this information.
Một lần nữa
Mercury being the
nghiên cứu đến
messenger of the gods and the agent of their applied control
những cái
is therefore the agent
thần cổ
of the
xưa,
third aspect of the active intelligence from one point of view, and of the second aspect from another. So it's sort of like a dual role. One is the intelligence factor, and the other is buddhi, or the pure reasoning mind.
Một yếu tố là yếu tố thông tuệ, và
we commonly term as the
yếu tố thứ
intuition.
hai là yếu tố
He is
bồ đề.
regarded as embodying in himself these aspects of the mental principles, the expression of the concrete and abstract mind of God.
Nó còn
Through
là
Mercury, the mind is illumined and relation is established between the personality and the soul. So we're all at some position in this equation of resolving these pairs of opposites. We're all an example of some success
có một số thành công mà chúng ta nhận được ra điều này.
Get rid of this. This is annoying. Yeah, Mercury illumines the mind and mediates between the soul and personality, being the messenger of gods. This media's shape in the first instance produces an inevitable opposition between the pairs of opposites and a long drawn-out conflict. So we're engaged in this, and of course we're all endeavoring to work out a particular formula for resolving those pairs of opposites. We call those the integration formulas, or the techniques of fusion, and just in our daily life of dealing with the stuff that we are immersed in, finding our way through the maze. So in this, when we're talking about the messenger of the gods, I always find myself referring back to the Master DK, because I find that he is such a wonderful example and representative of that particular energy. We first had it through H.B. Blavatsky, and if we look at her presentations of the teachings, they're of a particular tone. You can see Mercury had a function there, and she seemed to have more of the third ray dilemma in terms of her explanations of the teaching, how she involved that explanation in sort of debates with other thinkers of the time, almost to a point of argument, of the conflict aspect that she had strongly in her mercurial makeup. And then when we compare that, of course, there was wonderful depth of wisdom that she was revealing to us through those teachings. And then we compare that type of mercurial mind to the Alice Bailey functioning, and we're seeing a very pure, uncluttered intellect that's very sensitively attuned to the master. It's almost as if she's not in the way, not offering any obstruction. And so it's a lot easier read, you know, and the factor of intelligence comes through quite strongly, along with the second love wisdom aspect. So in those teachings, what we find is the genius of the master really is its ability to reveal and conceal simultaneously. So we have this multi-dimensional presentation of the teachings that can be applicable to whoever is reading those, dependent on where we're standing on the path. Now, this interesting thing about Mercury and those centers that we were looking at here, just had a glimpse of. Mercury in the center at the base of the spine and the human being are closely allied. Mercury demonstrates Kundalini intelligent activity, whilst Mars demonstrates latent Kundalini energy. So how does that work out in our energy system? I mean, there's much information available on the Kundalini that's rising or manipulation, but generally we're advised that this is something that really is only activated around the 3rd degree and comes in proper after that and towards the 4th. When that Kundalini energy is fully utilized. So we, to some degree, we're using our intelligence factor in that regard, dealing with the will energy, but mostly we're going to be under the influence of Mars in this respect of latent Kundalini. So how does that work for us? So in spits and spurts, cycles of perhaps intense activity and then other periods of nothing at all. And often some of our back pains and even headaches, migraines, that kind of thing will be almost involuntary rising of some of these Kundalini cycles. And not only that, also the movement of energies between some of the other centers, you know, when some of this energy is being transmuted to a higher center, or some of the exchange between these centers because of the dross in the system, because we have not yet, as yet, completed the purification necessary, we're going to be in pain. And that's what is referred to these sacred pains. We'll go into that a little bit further later. So often Mercury is impersonator, you know, Mercury is the trickster. And we're all familiar with impersonators of delusion. But basically, that's what our personality structure is as well. We're as those of us on the path, treading the path of discipleship in towards initiation. The personality becomes an impersonator of the soul. And hence, the Master advised us to act as if, to pretend we are that soul, and so becoming, in so doing, we're extending our realm of identification into the realm of the soul. Now, he says an interesting thing. He says, Mercury and the sun are one. It's one of those obscure statements. How do we get our head around that? You know, what sense can you make of that? You know, Mercury and the sun are one.
Tại sao có thể nói như vậy? Các bạn nhìn vào đây, đây mặt trời đây.
And I figure that is what he's referring to in terms of the function of Mercury,
đó là cái chức năng của thủy tinh.
Is that impulsing energy
nó là cái
that gives us the impetus
khiến cho
to
chúng
extend
ta
our
cái động lực
function of
để
identification
hoạt động
or expand it
với cái sự
into the higher realm of
rộng
the
mở
soul.
hay là đồng hóa.
And at different positions on the path,
ở các vị trí
Mercury
quá
serves a
khứ, ở
different
trong quá
function in
khứ
that
thì
way.
thủy tinh thì lại
Right? So
đóng
if
những cái vai
we're
trò khác
here, we
nhau.
are in our
Cho nên
sense
ở
of
đây bởi
individual
vì chúng
consciousness,
ta đang ở trong tâm thức cá nhân,
individuals, And we're expanding our awareness
chúng
into
ta đang
that
cố
of
gắng
group
mở rộng
relations,
cái tâm thức của chúng
of
ta
soul consciousness.
để hướng
Mercury
tới tâm
serves a
thức của
very
linh
important
hồn,
role here
thì
in that
thủy tinh đóng
sense.
một vai trò vô
Of
cùng
course,
quan
the
trọng ở
sun
đây.
does too in our chart.
Bởi vì
But
ở đâu chúng ta cũng
Mercury
nhìn thấy
represents the
nó rất là
ways and
gần với
means
mặt
by which
trời,
we will achieve that.
và nó giống như là cái phương tiện để mọi người có thể đạt
So
được
in
cái
doing
mục
that,
tiêu của họ.
when we're
Và
talking
để
about
làm được việc này, khi mà chúng ta
extending our consciousness
nói
in that manner, we're
về
coming
cái
into
tâm thức
this realm of
theo cái
building the
cách thức
Antakarana.
đó, thì chúng ta
And
nói
I
về
think
cái
that
gì
this is
liên quan
probably
đến biển
one of the most
Antakarana.
important
Đây là một
aspects
trong những cái khía
of the
cạnh
teaching that
quan
the
trọng
Master
nhất
DK
của
gave us
giáo lý của
during
Chư
this
DK
time.
đã dạy cho chúng ta vào thời điểm đó.
Now, if you've read
Như các bạn biết là nếu các bạn đọc
Education in the New Age, he describes it in very general terms,
giáo dục
and
trong
he
kỷ
even
nguyên
describes
mới, thì
education en
Ngài
masse
nói
as
là
being a factor
cái
of the
giáo
thread
dục
of
ở
preparing the
trên sao
population
Hỏa
for the actual building of the Antakarana proper. And so all of that we are involved in
giáo
terms
dục
of
cho số
the
đông
study
thì
that
cần
we
phải
do
giới thiệu cả cái
is
sự thật
an
về,
exercise in projecting
ví dụ như các
this
bài học
Antakarana thread
cũng được
to
phóng
achieve a
chiếu
greater
lên
understanding. Every time we do that,
Đức
we're
Christ, và mỗi
extending
lần chúng ta
further
làm,
and further this bridging
chúng ta đứng
process, and the linking will become stronger and stronger.
và nó sẽ ngày càng mạnh mẽ hơn.
So I'll just read this piece. As the Antakarana
Tôi
is
sẽ
built
đọc
by
ở
the
đây một
individual
chút.
between man and these 2 points, remember the formula line of fire between 2 points. So again, in
Và
a
một
planetary
lần nữa,
sense,
khi mà
is a
cây cầu
channel being
Antakarana
built by
được
the
xây dựng
collective
bởi
man
một
on
cá
this
nhân
planet
ở
and its
giữa hai
primary
điểm,
Venus.
thì một lần nữa
Right, so
một cái
again,
cảm giác
this is
về
all written in
hành tinh
blinds for us
là
to
một
decipher.
kênh dẫn đang được
But
xây dựng nên bởi
if we can
mọi
also
người
extend a notion
trên trái đất
of
này,
the mental unit in terms of a group sense and the monastic permanent absence in a group sense, all right? Here we are, a group of people involved in these studies, and we are polarized at the position of the mental unit, and then we're projecting our consciousness into the realm of the group. And here, in this instance, we can touch the higher consciousness of the soul, and we call that body of, or that group, the new group of world service. And again, the new group of service serves a very mercurial function, being the mediator between the hierarchy and humanity. Now, just below here, I'll go into that a little more. Just below here, I wanted to just draw some parallels between teaching on the 6 stages of the Antakarana and the function of Mercury, and the 6 stages of meditation and the 6 stages of discipleship. I find this very helpful, teaching on the 6 stages, all right? Posture, attitude, alignment, concentration, meditation, contemplation, distribution. So it's only when you get to the actual 4th stage that you begin to meditate. So in terms of the posture, in terms of its esoteric
Ở 6 cái giai đoạn
value,
trong tham thiền thì
really
thứ nhất
it's
là chúng ta cần phải có cái cử chỉ hay là thái độ như thế
achieving a
nào.
position of poise that
Thì
so
thủy
we are not
tinh nó sẽ giúp cho chúng ta thay
attendant
đổi
to
cái
the
cử
physical
chỉ
body. And it is
của
more
thể
focused
xác
then on
chúng
the
ta
attitude of what our intention
và cái thái
is
độ
for
mà chúng ta
sitting
cần
in
có
meditation.
khi
All
chúng
right,
ta
so we just
ngồi trong
tied
tham thiền,
those 2
ngồi
together.
thiền.
And usually this is the
Và thông thường
very
nó
first
là
initial stages of learning the
một cái
technique
phong cách rất
of
là cá
true
nhân hay là
meditation.
kỹ thuật
And
của
we
cá nhân.
associate that with the first
Chúng ta
stage
liên
of
hệ
discipleship
nó với cả
known as little challenger.
cái giai đoạn
It's a little
của
bit like a honeymoon period
đệ tử
because
Chela
there are a
nhỏ,
lot of gift waves that are bestowed upon the young Chala through this period, and
tức là
able
những
to
người
help steward them.
rất là trẻ
And like an
và
encouragement, I
mới tập
suppose, you
học.
know, it's a wonderful stage of experimentation, and it's like entering into a whole new world. So the next stage of alignment
Và
is more
cái
difficult and
giai
technical,
đoạn tiếp
and
tục
of course
của chỉnh
this
hợp đó là,
part of the technique
và
is
đây cũng
something
là cái
that's
kỹ thuật
developed over a series of
mà
lives,
chúng ta phải phát triển
because we're
thông qua
dealing
nhiều
with
kiếp sống.
a
Bởi
movement
vì
of conscious through
khi chúng ta
different
đối
planes
mặt với
and
các cái sự
subplanes.
thay
And as
đổi
success
ở
is
trong các
achieved,
cõi phụ,
the ingredients
thì
of the
những
actual
cái
alignment in
vật chất
terms
ở
of
cõi
the
đấy
imagery that may be
nó
used,
sẽ
or
chỉnh
the
hợp chúng ta với những
particular
hình ảnh tương tự,
will energy that's harnessed
hay là cái năng
changes.
lượng ý chí nó
All right.
sẽ được
So
đưa ra.
we could sit
Chúng ta có thể ngồi
through our whole lives use this
và
particular
qua toàn bộ cuộc sống của
technique,
chúng ta.
but even in the next series of lives, this would still be developed. And I find that's
Chúng ta
associated
tham
with
thiền về
this
một cái gì đấy
stage of
và
the
có thể
Antakarana of
là trong kiếp
visualization, all right,
sống tới
which is
chúng ta
kind
vẫn
of
còn đang phải
pivotal
thay đổi
in our
và
world
phát
at the
triển từ
moment. You
đó.
know, there's so much imagery that we're
Có rất là
bombarded
nhiều
with,
hình ảnh mà
so
chúng ta
much
có thể kết hợp với
intensity
những cái
of
này,
imagery that's so evocative in so many different ways, you know,
và có rất là
but it's
nhiều
all
cách khác
preparatory
nhau.
to the second stage of building the Antakarana, all right? And that's associated with the degree of chala in the light. So what's happening here is the centers in the head, particularly the Ajna center, and that associated with the pituitary gland and the pineal gland, the ultimator, they're starting to heat up. The throat center is starting to have an effect here. And so there's a light that starts to shine in the cavity of the head. Some people can see that themselves, others don't. They actually have more like a sense of a vacant space. But anyway, a greater understanding is achieved as a result of this light, right? It's like an awakening to the energy and dynamics of the soul. All right, so there's a lot. This is quite an intense period that we're passing through as we're traversing this particular territory of discipleship. Next stage, concentration. Again, it's a focalizing energy that's going on here. In some ways, it's very
Và cái
similar
giai
to the
đoạn tiếp theo đó
intention
là
stage
giai
of
đoạn
building the
tập
Antakarana.
trung.
But once again, we're limiting
Nó sẽ hạn
where
chế
our mind is going and what we're visualizing here.
những gì
All right?
đang
Really
xảy ra xung
focusing
quanh.
in
Chúng ta
on
chỉ tập
the
trung
goal of what we're
vào
attempting to achieve in this
và những cái
meditation.
mà
Say
chúng
it's
ta đang
soul
muốn đạt tới trong cái
personality
bài tham thiền
integration.
của chúng ta.
All right? Or perhaps it's the Antakarana meditation itself. Right?
Và
Which
có thể
then
chính
is
cái cây cầu Antakarana
applicable to
cũng là một
use the
cái để chúng
stage
ta
of
tham thiền.
projection. And remember what I said before about
Cái mà tôi nói trước đây
Mercury of
về thủy tinh
projecting our
và nó
sense
là
of
phóng chiếu,
identification into the higher realms.
giống như là nó
In
sẽ
fact,
tìm được những cái bản dạng tương tự ở trên cõi cao hơn.
Well, it's actually the third dhyana meditation. The master advises us to project our consciousness as high as we possibly can, and even suggests to use the monad as the target of that projection.
Và
And
đôi
this
khi là
is
sử dụng
analogous
đến
to the
chân
stage of
thần
accepted
giống như
discipleship.
là cái mục tiêu của sự phóng chiếu này.
It obviously requires some high degree of discipline, and that is the requirement of that particular stage. All right. You can read about those in back of Dhyana 1, the stages of 6 stages of discipleship. One wonderful bit of teaching. All right. So the full stage meditation. All right. So you kind of get in the zone here.
Tư là
and
meditation.
Of course, everyone has their different particular techniques, but generally these are the stages that we'll be passing through.
Và nhưng mà chúng ta biết đây là cái giai đoạn mà chúng ta sẽ trải qua.
Just actually
nó sẽ tạo ra
to
một cái
getting
thành
here,
tựu.
and this is often where we introduce a seed thought of some kind, or some type of imagery that we can focus on
bất cứ một
that
cái
will
hình
carry
ảnh
us,
nào
project us forward.
Thì nó cũng
This is
đều có thể giúp
the
chúng ta tiến về
evocative stage
phía
of
trước.
the Antakarana, and it's quite potent, of course, and we could tie that in with a lot of the imagery. Even the one above here, this one, we can see all of these pilgrims in a state of invocation. All right. And this is analogous to the stage of chala on the thread. this is the proper, I would say, the example of, say, Alice Bailey would have entered into incarnation as an accepted disciple and soon advanced to Chela on the thread when she was working with the master. But I think advanced on to Chela in aura in her later years when she was forming the arcane school. All right, so then the phase of contemplation, the Zen moment in our meditative technique. And it's a position of real potency. It's difficult to achieve. In other words, there's a lot of training that's gone in and an ability to hold the mind steady in the light. But this is a point of spiritual absorption of those energies that are becoming available. And of course, this requires this factor of stabilization to withstand those energies because they are disruptive. They're of a high potency, and it takes time for these to settle down and not pull us apart or cause overstimulation of either our emotional nature or all of our intellect. And once that stabilization is achieved, I think that's when we are at the stage of Chela in the aura. Okay, so it's close association with the master. And I think that some of those in the discipleship group, there were a number of them that probably had achieved that, probably Foster Bailey, probably Roberto Asciuoli. Think of some of the theosophical people. I would say most definitely Lena Blavatsky. Possibly, you got the Leadbeaters and Biff Sands and those kinds. Jeffrey Hodgson, I think, had that kind of capacity. He had that potency. So then the final stage is distribution. And probably in some ways the most important. It relates to the factor of service and is very much a mercurial type of focus or type of function. All right, so those energies that are absorbed, those high potency spiritual energies, they must be distributed in the environment. Otherwise, they're going to implode on the subtle psychic nature and you end up singeing your centers. This is referred to as the resurrection. And I don't really know. I can't, I'm not familiar enough with what that is. A blind here that when we look at the nature of resurrection and the process of resurrection, I see that in terms of how that's occurring in the greater groups, Say like as individual entering the field of the new group of world service. All right. And we're all kind of somewhere in that field. And of course, I've put in here Chela in the heart, which is the higher degree here. I think that Master DK gave his example of his earlier discipleship relationship with the Master KH. And very much of that nature. In fact, he does describe an event where he could not move forward. He was described as being glamored by his devotional nature to the master. And that's what prevented him from moving from Chela in the aura to Chela in the heart. And once he saw that and overcame that, he advanced forward. And of course, there's this next stage. It's called blending of the lights. And I think that's when the master forms a sub-ashram of the other Chowan within the ashram. All right. So a lot of this is dependent on this. Just read this little piece. I call your attention to the entire theme of vision and necessarily underlies our consideration of the points of revelation It is simple
Thủ
to
lại đọc một cái
recognize
trích
that
dẫn
in the
là
head
tôi
of the
muốn kêu
developing
gọi cái
aspirant,
sự chú
there is a
ý của tất cả các
mechanism of
bạn
great
đến một cái chủ
potency
đề về tầm nhìn. Nó rất là quan
capable
trọng
of
khi chúng ta
controlling the
xem
life
xét
of the
các cái
personality.
điểm ở
There is
trong cái
one,
sự
the third
hiển
eye,
lộ.
not the pineal gland, but its
Về đơn giản
etheric
là sẽ nhận ra
correspondence.
ở trong
This is the
đầu những
responsive
người
mechanism of the
trí
directing
nguyện
eye of
đang
the
phát triển
soul.
là có một cái cơ chế rất là tiềm năng và có khả năng kiểm soát được sự sống của phàm ngã.
Okay,
Đó
so
là
that's central cavity in the head. The right and left eye, which make the incoming energy symbolic.
Thứ nhất là đôi mắt thứ ba với cái tuyến tùng cùng với cả sự đáp ứng ở thể dị thái của nó. Và đây là một cái cơ chế tương ứng, nó hướng đến đôi mắt của linh hồn. Rồi ở con mắt phía bên phải và con mắt phía bên trái thì nó sẽ lấy cái năng lượng đang đến và nó một cách biểu tượng là nó chia ra hai dòng chảy. Đó là một cái sự tương ứng ở trong cõi vật lý dị thái của Bồ Đề Manas.
Usually in triangular form, we would add obviously in this
Thường
one
thì là
Mercury,
ở
Venus, and
trong
the Earth.
tam giác thì chúng ta có thể
Or the higher
nói
octave,
có
if we're
thể thấy
considering the
nhìn
pineal
thấy cái
gland,
sự kết nối giữa
put
kim tinh và
Uranus
thủy
there.
tinh.
Anyway, I can just continue here.
Và chúng ta có thể tiếp tục.
Demanded by Shambhala is that human consciousness will become possible. One, the Antakarana can be built and the shining of the triad can be seen. Such will be the new vision and outcome of the development
ở trên kia được yêu cầu bởi Shambhala mà đạt được trong sự phát triển của nghệ thuật hình dung tưởng tượng. Và thông qua hình dung tưởng tượng thì có ba cái sự biểu lộ của tâm thức nhân loại nó sẽ trở thành có thể. Đầu tiên là cây cầu Antakarana được xây dựng và nó sẽ phát tỏa thành ở trong của tam giác tam thể thượng và nó sẽ chắc chắn được nhìn thấy. Nó là một tầm nhìn mới và là kết quả của một sự phát triển của một cảm giác về tầm nhìn. Và hầu như là chúng ta nhìn thấy các nhóm rất là lớn và sự tổng hợp chính sẽ được hình dung. Và chúng ta đang nói ở phía trên này ở cái trung tâm Asna thì nó có 96 cánh hoa.
Within the Ajna Center, in other words, within the greater group of the new group of world service, each has a function. And what I'm suggesting here is one of those 96 relates to this accent of vision, which the esoteric group has its purpose and function is to actualize that.
Của sự hình dung.
Two groups large wholes and major.
Rồi
synthesis will be visualized, and this will lead to a definite expansion of consciousness. Thus, the sense of synthesis will be unfolded. Sense of vision and the sense of synthesis through visualization will lead to the sense of livingness in form. So again, these are interesting ways in which he formulates these instructions. Notice livingness in form. We're not discarding it. It's been made sacred. Now, I'll just check on time here. How are we going for time here, Heidi?
We are at time, but you are welcome to go on for a couple of minutes if you would like.
Okay, I would, because you know what? I'd love to talk about these cities because there's so much, you know, once we're involved in this, engaged in this work of building the Antakarana into these higher subplanes of the mental planes, there's consequences for that. And as ability as a cheetah, some of these higher cities come into functioning activity. So let's just, I won't have to go through all of them, but just a few. that we can perhaps get a handle on, because I think it's very important to even discuss these and describe them so we have some understanding and a working ability with them. So the first one I have is the higher psychometry. And, you know, like you hear this often now, reading the room, or someone's inability to read the room, you know, in terms of their, you know, ignorance of these matters. And this is quite a basic functioning of that particular city. It reminds me of when I was a young man and I used to attend these lectures by clairvoyant Jeffrey Hodson. He was just quite a special guy, you know, really. His function of reading the room was he'd be giving a lecture on some particular topic, could be the 7 rays. As he was talking, there may be 300 people in that room. He would look at the audience and at each person and connect with them. And in such a way, while he was still speaking of the lecture, you were in this vortex of light and sort of locked in. And he'd be looking right into the causal body. And it felt like you were naked in front of his mind's eye, you know? There were no secrets here. And after the talk, a few of us would get together and talk about, you know, how wonderful that was. And we all had that same experience, you know, this higher psychometry of reading the room. The sense of recognition is very much, because I think that's very related to the functioning of Mercury, you know, that sense of connection and exchange that's going on there, and interpretation that's happening in that working of that sense. The sense of recognition, again, is, you know, when we hear the truth and it rings in our ears. Again, this is Mercury in action on these higher subplanes. That sense of insight that comes to us, or the sense of registration, when we have when we're impacted by these higher energies, we're not wanting them to blow us apart or overstimulate us, our centers. We're going to have to learn to manage it, and it takes time. All right. And of course, there's I just mentioned telepathy because this is ruled by the highest subplane, and in the full moon
chúng ta
work,
nói đến
remember,
cái chức năng như là cái cầu nối cho chúng ta
full
để
moon
hướng
event,
tới các
is
cái
it not?
cõi giới cao hơn.
In the full moon,
Như ví dụ
Master
như là vào
recommends
thời
that
điểm
we
trăng
endeavor
tròn
as a group
thì
to make
chúng ta hãy
contact.
cố gắng như một
And
nhóm
the ways and
tiếp
means in
cận
which
với
we do
Ngài,
that is
liên
through
lạc với
the
Ngài.
technique of telepathy.
Thì
So
nó
he's given us
cũng
quite
rất
a
là
lot of
quan trọng để chúng
information
ta
on
biết
how
cách
in
sử dụng
that
cái kỹ thuật viễn
visualization that he
cảm
offers,
trong
how
khi
that
chúng
should be
ta hình
used.
dung tưởng tượng.
I think I should just wind up here, actually, Heidi, if we're out of time, but I mentioned response to need. And that's an
Nhưng tôi muốn
interesting
nói
one
là
again, that
khi mà chúng ta thực
factor of
hành,
recognition
chúng ta nhận ra
coupled with this factor of service
cái công việc
draws
phụng sự
from
của
us
chúng ta,
what is required
đó là chúng ta
in
nhận
that
ra được
moment.
nhu cầu và thời
You
điểm
know, these are
đó.
wonderful things. These are
Đây là
wonderful
một điều tuyệt vời,
cities that we're learning to develop.
bởi
There's
vì chúng
quite
ta
a
đang học
field
cách để phát
of
triển.
interest
Nó
in
là
all
một
of this.
cái
A
trường
sense of group destiny.
Trường năng
Imagine
lượng
that.
cho mục tiêu nhóm, mục đích nhóm.
Of what is ahead for the group.
Là
Not just of what we're able to do
cái
now,
gì
but
là
as
trong
time goes on,
nhóm.
as we become more effective in our service, as we coalesce more effectively, as we become more in tune with those higher centers, hierarchical centers, in particular the ashram, the group destiny begins to dawn on us. And I think that that fits well with the sense of right timing. That's obvious, isn't it? I already mentioned somewhat divine vision, but the sense of divine proportion that keeps these things in perspective. So, of course, we don't suffer from inflation, you know? Anyway, I think I should finish there. I mean, there's so much to speak of in terms of Mercury and its function, and of course, the variables of how that works in any individual case by its placement and influences in the chart.
Jeff, maybe we can, thank you so much. And maybe there's a question here from Tuya, and maybe we can actually stop sharing the screen, and maybe we can bring start to bring the other astrologers on too, because we're going to end up doing a sort of Q&A. But
yeah.
Tuya's question for you is about what is your take on Mercury Sirius? Sirius called the star of Mercury, and how do you understand this issue? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, yes, I do, of course. You know, you got to get down here. You got to go into the rules of Raisin initiations, okay? And you know the rules for group initiation, and it's covered in this Rule 12. I'm not going to go into it in depth, but there's a relationship here. We have the star of Sirius, and then in terms of how the hierarchy themselves use that, he gives the example of, I should have written this in, Aquarius, and then a triangle is formed with Pisces and Taurus. Pisces is the age we've just lived through, and that developed in the human race the factor of sensitivity, okay? It's connected to the star of sensitivity because above all this shines the star Sirius, which the hierarchy in Shambhala are utilizing through this period. So it's Pisces. On the other side, on the base of that triangle, is Taurus, which is a sign of the new group of world servers. And there is an awakening that is occurring within that group, of which we're all participating to and adding to in our own way, and through our understanding of the teachings, of the using them, of applying them in our daily life. All right. Hovering above those 2 points of that triangle is Aquarius, because Aquarius represents the field we are moving towards. All right. So in the theosophical terminology, remember they said there is no religion higher than truth. Religion relates to Pisces, of faith. Aquarius relates to experiential livingness. All right? Truth relates to experiential livingness within the group realm. And all of that in this particular instruction is focused through the planet Mercury. And that it hovers over the new group of world service and disperses, is transmitted to the wider groups through those participants in the new group of world service. I hope that helps somewhat, Julia.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Why don't you stay on, and friends, astrologer friends, join me on video. And this is your opportunity to ask any of us any questions from anything throughout the day, friends. I know you are full and digesting, but this is always such a wonderful synthetic opportunity and a chance to ask the questions that perhaps you didn't get to ask. Jeff, could you stop? Let me see. What's going on? Are we all on a gallery? Is that me? That's me. Forget it. That's my problem. Okay. So you can either unmute, or you can write something into the text, or astrologers gathered, you please also feel free to speak to anything from today that struck you.
I'm just always struck by the magic of what you pulled together here, Heidi, and everyone that has worked on pulling this together for today and for all the years that have gone before, of just the, you know, what an amazing piece of collaboration and creating magic in the world.
It's definitely a testament to showing up repeatedly, practicing, you know, coming to the practice of group work. Yes.
I have a question for Francis. I wonder if you could elaborate on what you had said in your presentation about the planetary logos. You said he's not really the planetary logos. There was something you said I didn't quite catch. I wonder if you can elaborate on that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yeah, sure. Well, okay. Uranus is the seventh ray Lord. He's also a part of the personality of the second ray Lord. which includes 3 schemes. And this is an eye-opener, because if that's the case, then Jupiter is not the second-ray lord that is described, for instance, in Esoteric Psychology 1, when he's talking about all the attributes of these great ray lords. They're discrete, they're separate individuals. We also have Saturn, the Earth, and Mars, forming the personality of the third ray lord. So I'm mentioning this because it makes clear that these ray lords are not the planetary lords, or not the planetary logos, or logoi, right? So also you have the fact that, for instance, in the case of Uranus, that being is expressive not only of the 7th ray, but of the 3rd ray in its personality expression, and of the 1st ray in its monadic expression. Also, when that great being at the end of the cycle becomes a synthesizing planet, it will be as a 1st ray being. So all of these mitigate against the idea that a ray lord and a planetary logoi are the same thing, right? That they're the same being. Also, you have the other piece of evidence is that ray cycles happen, as we know, they come and go. The 7th ray is coming in, the 6th ray is going out. That's the influence of those particular ray lords. Well, Neptune and Mars are not going out. Their influence is very much with us and consistent, as is Uranus, which is coming, whose energy is coming in, but it's been consistent even when the 7th ray lord was not in manifestation. So those are, does that help clarify the difference?
I think so.
You think so? Yeah. It's really interesting to try to find, DK never addresses this. He never says, this is a ray lord and this is a planetary logoi, because he'll talk about a planetary logoi as a lord of a particular ray. And he is, but there is this other group of 7 ray lords that are not specifically connected with the planets.
Okay.
Greg just is asking, when we talk about the planetary logos, which one or ones are we talking about?
Well, the 7 sacred planets, but, there's another interesting teaching, which is that there's, as we know, there's really either 9, 10, or 12 planets, and that 7 of them are sacred. And that's where when DK tells us that, he also tells us that 3 of these schemes form the personality life of, for example, the 3rd ray lord. And 2 of those are non-sacred schemes. Mars and the Earth are non-sacred schemes, and in connection with Saturn, which represents the mental body of the 3rd ray lord. I know this is really out there stuff. And that that Mars represents the astral body of that 3rd ray lord, and that our Earth represents the physical body of that 3rd ray lord. So this is a way for these 2 non-sacred planets, the Earth and Mars, of participating with the lives that are represented by the 7 sacred planets. Because very often he says, the 7 planets, blah, 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 blah. And you go, well, we know Earth's not one of them. So where does that put us? Well, here is one of the ways in which the Earth is connected through Mars and Saturn with a triangle of 3rd ray life, and with that sacred planet Saturn.
Thank you, Francis. Is any other questions? And they don't have to be difficult or dense. You can ask the simplest questions too if they're out there. Don't worry.
Yeah, if you go more dense than that, you know, it may not work out. Yeah.
Okay, here's a question. I'm wondering how you can use the concept of growing into opposites, if I'm saying this correctly, when someone's chart has most planets on one half, either the right, left, or top, bottom. In other words, how can someone get more balance when their chart is imbalanced? But not trying to say that evaluative. That's a great question. Any of our astrologers want to take that one?
I'll give a little say to that. Well, you know, the imbalance is really only apparently so that you're not any one particular part of a chart, you're the entire chart. And no planet's limited to any position other than that's the signature of what we're born with. So it shows something about that, but it doesn't mean to say that's a void at all. Progressions occur continually, transits are going on, you know, and by way of substitution of the different rulers, there's activity in all aspects of the charts, usually pretty well at all times. And in particular for those involved in spiritual work, this is so. But you may be focusing on one particular area in terms of your consciousness in any one period, which can give us the perception that is the case. Okay.
Beautifully said. Does anyone want to add to that?
Yes, I think that relating it to Dean's presentation, looking at the opposites, so even if you have a bunch of planets all focused in one area and you're only looking at just that particular part of the chart, you can, with that practice, integrate it with the opposite sign and recognize it again as Rudyard said, that there's no one planet or there's no one sign all by itself. It's the sign and its opposite. You don't just have one half of a stick. And that way makes it such that you through the practice you can integrate whatever signs you have with its opposite, and that's one way to help bring balance to a chart or explore the signs of your chart that aren't really represented with natal chart planets. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
You can finish, Milton. Can finish. One thing that always helps me with the concept of oppositions is to remember that DK says that in the future, astrology won't have 12 signs, but 6 axes. So one of the things that we do a lot in astrology, that's why the 8th figure that Dean discussed is so good, is that we don't have 12 signs, we have 6 axes. And we're constantly working with the axis. And that's why DK recommended doing the full moon meditations, because with the full moon he actually said, practice 6 months of full moon meditations and see what happens as you learn to integrate the axis instead of seeing polarities. So whenever you see a planet in your chart, even though, as Jeff said, when you were born, that signature is in one side, but see that as an axis, see that in movement, and it progresses. And also we have the axis in the chart itself as a map, the AC, the DC, IC, MC, and this is constantly moving and the energy is in flux there. Another reminder and final one is that we have the sun in one side and the earth is the exact opposite of our suns. So another reminder, the importance of always looking at axis and not just one-sided, right?
I'd like to offer an example. Actually, this one is an easy one to really get, and that's Aries and Libra. Libra can certainly use a little more Aries, right? Libra is very happy to get along, to cooperate. Sometimes it needs to be a little more aggressive, a little bit more, a little more energetic. Whereas Aries could definitely use a little bit of the Libran qualities. It can sometimes put its foot in its mouth, not really be all that, considerate of the other person, and so on. The same holds true for all the opposites. If you know what the opposite is, it's easy enough to try to incorporate that and make the two integrate together.
I'll just say one thing, Kimber, to your specific example of having everything in one specific part of your chart, just emphasizing what Jeff was saying about transits. Oftentimes you'll get transits moving through the opposite side, and that'll help you work with it. And as well, I would say partners, people in our lives that have those energies, they come in and they help us integrate it too. So it could be interesting to look at your partners or your children.
Could I add to that, that even if it feels like you don't have a planetary placement, the sign is somewhere in the chart. It could be ruling a house. And so whenever that transiting energy is going on, that house will light up ways for you, as Bruno was saying, to work with that energy.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Good. Yes, and Tuya was saying the same thing in the chat, that that if we would mark the other points, the chart would be completely full. We make us yes, it's a question of choice. Good. All right, here's another. Oh, Jeff. Okay, Jeff has a question for all astrologers and community. What intersectional thought has been created on the language and vocabulary of esoteric astrology that may be outdated with a more modern, inclusive world? How are we educating ourselves as astrologers to not pass on bias, discriminate, or perpetrate outdated stereotypes and/or general racial hierarchy? How are we opening ourselves to greater diversity? That's a big, rhetorical, beautiful question that we get to hold throughout this time together.
Well, we're experimenting as we go along, aren't we? We're forming a language, that works. Doesn't necessarily work that effectively, but we have to do that. No one else is doing it for us.
Peter says silence and observation help.
I'll speak from my experience. I choose whenever possible to not perpetuate language or narrative that moves outdated, exclusive to exclusivity forward. So kind of like Toni Morrison said, when you know better, do better. So whenever I have the opportunity to frame or lend something from the most inclusive perspective possible, I choose to do that in every approach I have to astrology.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
I would also like to say that it's expansiveness. You can't put anything in a little box and leave that little box, because it's not so. All these energies have so many nuances to them that it is not one size fits all. Mercury can be so many different things, and every other planet and every sign has so many aspects of it, and we all might be using it a little bit differently. So you have to be open to the fact that just because my Venus is in Virgo, my Venus is going to act the same as Eva's Venus, which might also be in Virgo. Because we have other things going on with planets. So you have to be all inclusive, you have to be all expansive, and you have to be aware of the fact that there's so many nuances going on, and you can't close it up by saying Venus in Virgo was going to be like this and that's it, and you listen to me and you don't listen to anybody. You can't do that. You cannot do that. It's live, it's active, and it's expansive.
I would like to invite my reflections on DK's words on diversity for me is when DK says you need to meditate in group, because each one of you individually do not have all the chakras aligned or lit. But when you get together in group, each one of you complement the other. Another reminder is when he told us, Saggioli, to get out of his comfort zone and learn to work with people from different race. He said that Sadi only had a tendency to only work with Ray 2 people. And he said, stretch your wings and work with people from different radiology because you complement each other. Then you are more effectively in terms for the hierarchical work, because individually you don't shine that much. But as group, then you make some difference.
I know, I mean,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's a great point, Mitty. You know, DK, whenever he gets the chance, teaches us to develop group consciousness, but it's so absolutely foreign to our personality lives that the habits of thinking, even when you're thinking about group consciousness, tend to be separative and individualistic. It's a quite a thing to bridge, even imaginatively, and imagine, for instance, you know, this group of, what do we have, 11 astrologers, you know, whose pictures are on screen here, and a total of 70 other people. What is the nature of the consciousness of this 11, of the 81? And it's worthy of consideration. You know, what is it? Is it possibly already in a embryonic state? And if so,